Is it me, or is something seriously wrong here? The radiator hissed, a mournful sigh in the otherwise silent apartment. Outside, the November wind rattled the window panes, sounding like skeletal fingers drumming on glass. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I'd moved in, and 3 weeks of progressively worse sleep, or more accurately, lack thereof. It wasn't the radiator, not entirely. It wasn't the wind, either. It was something else. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A feeling, a pressure. A sense of wrongness that clung to the air like a damp shroud. Before the divorce, I slept like a log. Now I was lucky to get 3 hours of fitful, dream-haunted rest. I'd even briefly seen a therapist, but a few sessions hadn't really done much. They talked about stress management and mindfulness. Easier said than done when you felt like you were being watched, even in your own damn apartment. The building itself was nothing special. Brick, 3 stories, maybe 30 units in total. Old, sure, but clean enough. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly lady across the hall, had welcomed me with a plate of suspiciously dry cookies and a knowing smile. "This old place has seen a lot," she'd said, her voice a raspy whisper. A lot. I chuckled it off, chalking it up to old lady eccentricity. But now I wasn't so sure. It started small, creaks in the hallway when no one was there. The flickering of the overhead light in the kitchen. The feeling of cold air on my neck when the heat was blasting. I attributed it to the building's age, to my frayed nerves, to anything other than what my gut was screaming at me. Then came the voice. It wasn't a shout or even a clear word. More like a whisper, a murmur just at the edge of hearing. I'd hear it when I was alone, usually late at night, when the only other sound was the hum of my computer. It sounded like someone was trying to speak through a thick wall. The words garbled and indistinct. The first time I thought I was imagining it, sleep deprivation maybe, but it kept happening. Every night the whisper grew a little louder, a little clearer. I started trying to decipher it, straining my ears, holding my breath. One night I thought I heard it say my name. Liam, just barely audible, a breath against my ear. I called David. "Dude, you're freaking me out," he said, his voice laced with amusement. David was a cop, a practical, no-nonsense kind of guy. Ghosts and whispers weren't exactly his thing. It's probably just the building settling, or you're finally losing it after the Sarah thing. It's not that, I insisted. I swear I hear something. A voice. "Okay, a voice," David said, humoring me. "Maybe you've got carbon monoxide poisoning. You got a detector?" I did. It was working fine. "Look, just try to relax, man," David said. "Get some sleep. Maybe lay off the caffeine." Easier said than done. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and sleeplessness. The whispers intensified, morphing into something more sinister. They were still unintelligible, but the tone was malevolent, angry. I started seeing things too, shadows in the corner of my eye, objects moving slightly. I'd leave my keys on the table and find them on the counter later. I'd close the bathroom door and find it ajar in the morning. I was losing it. I knew I was. I started researching the building. City records, old newspapers, anything I could find. There wasn't much. Just the usual stuff: permits, ownership transfers, nothing remarkable. Then I stumbled across something in an online forum, a comment on a thread about local ghost stories. Someone mentioned a tragedy that had occurred in my building decades ago. A young woman murdered in her apartment. The case was never solved. The comment was vague, unsourced, but it sent a chill down my spine. I installed security cameras, cheap ones, the kind you stick on the wall with adhesive strips, one in the living room, one in the hallway. I told myself it was to catch whoever was moving my keys, but deep down I knew I was hoping to catch something else. The footage was useless, mostly static, occasional glimpses of something. A shadow flitting across the screen, a distorted image that could have been anything or nothing. Sarah called. She was worried. "You sound terrible, Liam," she said, her voice soft. "Are you taking care of yourself?" "I'm fine," I lied. "No, you're not," she said, her tone firm. "David told me you're hearing things, seeing things. Liam, have you considered going back to therapy?" "It's not me, Sarah," I pleaded. "Something's happening here. I don't know what it is, but it's real." There was a long silence. I don't know what to say, Liam," she finally said. "I want to believe you. I really do." But she didn't. I could hear it in her voice. She thought I was cracking up. That night, the voice was louder than ever. It was almost clear now, the words forming in my mind like icy splinters. "Get out," it whispered. "Get out." I couldn't sleep. I sat in my chair, staring at the security monitor, my heart pounding in my chest. The apartment felt colder than usual, the air thick with dread. Around 3 a.m., I heard a knock on my door. Hesitantly, I peeked through the peephole. It was Mrs. Henderson. I opened the door a crack. "Liam, dear," she said, her voice a raspy whisper. "Are you all right?" I heard noises. "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just couldn't sleep." She looked at me, her eyes narrowed. "This building, it has a history," she said. "A dark history. You know about the girl, don't you?" I swallowed hard. "The murder," she nodded. She wasn't the first. "And she won't be the last if we're not careful." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "There's something here, Liam," she said, "something hungry. It feeds on fear, on despair. You have to be strong. You have to fight it." "How?" I asked. "How do I fight something I can't even see?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. Take this, she said, pressing it into my hand. It belonged to her. To the girl, it might protect you. I looked at the locket, then back at Mrs. Henderson. Her eyes were filled with a strange, unsettling intensity. Thank you, I said, clutching the locket tightly. Be careful, Liam, she said. Be very careful. She turned and shuffled back to her apartment, leaving me standing in the doorway, the locket heavy in my hand. I closed the door and locked it. Then I went back to my chair and stared at the security monitor, the whispers echoing in my head. Get out, get out, get out. The next day I noticed something odd. The delivery guy who usually dropped off packages for the building avoided eye contact with me. He practically threw the package at me and bolted. Everything okay? I asked. Here he stammered, his voice tight. He was visibly shaken. They don't pay me enough for this route. That evening David stopped by. Look, I talked to Miller, he said, referring to a detective he worked with, about the old case. The girl who was murdered. They never found anything solid. No witnesses, no forced entry, just a dead girl in her apartment. And I asked, my voice barely a whisper. And Miller said there were rumors, David said, rumors about the apartment, about it being cursed. But it's just rumors, Liam. Come on, cursed? Yeah, look, I'm just saying people talk. Doesn't mean it's true, but I could see the doubt in David's eyes. He was starting to believe me, or at least he was starting to believe that something was seriously wrong. That night was the worst yet. The whispers turned into screams. The shadows danced in the corners of the room. Objects flew across the apartment. I huddled in the corner, clutching the silver locket, my body shaking uncontrollably. The voice was inside my head now, a constant, relentless barrage of terror. You can't escape, it screamed. You're mine now. I called David, my voice choked with fear. David, please, I sobbed. It's here. It's really here. You have to help me. I'm on my way, he said, his voice urgent. Hold on, Liam. Just hold on. I don't know how long I waited. It felt like an eternity. The apartment was in chaos. Furniture overturned. Pictures smashed, the air thick with a palpable sense of evil. Then finally I heard the pounding on the door. Liam, open up. I crawled to the door and unlocked it. David burst in, his gun drawn. What the hell? He said, his eyes wide with disbelief. The apartment was a wreck, but more than that, there was something wrong about the air. A heavy, oppressive presence that made it hard to breathe. It's here, I whispered, pointing to the shadows that danced on the walls. It's here, David. You have to see it. David looked around, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion. Liam, I don't see anything, he said. Are you sure? Then the lights flickered and died, plunging the apartment into darkness. A blood-curdling scream filled the air, not from me, but from the apartment itself. A force grabbed me, threw me against the wall. Liam, David yelled. David started firing his gun into the darkness. The shots echoed through the apartment, deafening and terrifying. I felt a searing pain in my chest, like I was being crushed from the inside out. I gasped for air, my vision blurring. Then everything went silent. The lights flickered back on. David was standing over me, his gun still raised, his face pale with shock. Liam, are you okay? I coughed, struggling to sit up. My chest ached, but I didn't see any blood. What was that? David stammered, his voice trembling. What did I just shoot at? I looked around the apartment. The shadows were gone. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The oppressive presence had vanished, but the apartment was still a wreck. And David looked like he'd seen a ghost. The police arrived a few minutes later, sirens wailing, lights flashing. They searched the apartment, questioned David and me. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle. Just a trashed apartment and two shaken men. I was taken to the hospital for psychiatric evaluation. They ran tests, asked questions. They diagnosed me with severe anxiety and sleep deprivation. They prescribed medication and recommended therapy. David testified on my behalf, telling the doctors about the state of the apartment, about the noises he'd heard, about the look in my eyes. But even he couldn't explain what had happened. I was released from the hospital a week later. Sarah picked me up. I'm so sorry, Liam, she said, her voice soft. I should have believed you. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I went back to my apartment. It was clean now. The damage repaired, but it didn't feel the same. It felt empty, haunted. I sat in my chair, staring at the wall, the silver locket clutched in my hand. The medication helped somewhat, but I still couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadows, heard the whispers. I don't know if what happened was real. I don't know if I was hallucinating. I don't know if I'm crazy. All I know is that something happened in that apartment. Something terrifying. Something I can't explain. And sometimes late at night, when the wind rattles the window panes and the radiator hisses, I still hear it. A faint whisper just at the edge of hearing, "Welcome home. I think I'm going to move."